People, the representatives, of course, from HUD or FHA or whatever out of Birmingham, they cover the state to try to get their quota. They want X number of housing, public housing units in Alabama. So these people come into town and contact developers statewide and say, how many can you give me? How many can you, they've got deadlines and quotas to meet. And these apartments were conceived based on the number of bedrooms you could get. That's what made it look good. You got more rent, and the person who's trying to fill his quota was certainly filled quicker with 3, 4, and 5 bedroom units crammed on the smallest possible space that he could get. So that, I think, was the original beginning of the problem. From that point on, they followed basically no guidelines whatsoever as to type construction, of any of the materials, anything that went in the units. Therefore, the developer was certainly going to put the cheapest he could get on the, and put them up as fast as he possibly could. So that tends to lead to a lot of problems over the years. So these units also were totally controlled, the location, the types, the materials, and so forth, by HUD. Now, this was not contacting the Montgomery Housing Authority and asking them, what do you suggest, or what guidelines do you think we should follow, or any of the input that they might have. These units were built and at that time turned over to the Montgomery Housing Authority. And the way they were turned over, this particular area here being one that needs to be specifically pointed out, that they didn't finish these 300 units or whatever we have here that at one time and completely finish it, landscape it, touched up to the last detail and say, here, Montgomery Housing Authority, take it over. As the units were completed, they were turned over to the Housing Authority. At the other end of the project, there might be still pouring foundations and so forth. So I understand in back even in that era that they had a tremendous amount of theft and vandalism during construction. So then you can start from top to bottom and look at the construction and at the quality, and they do meet the requirements set out by HUD, being MPS standards that all single-family homes are built under. But these same qualifications don't necessarily hold true. And over the last 10 years, nationwide has proven to be a disaster on the part of the federal government in allowing this type of construction. Federal housing gets so much more use and abuse than conventional housing that the same MPS doesn't hold true, and the same products won't hold up in a single-family dwelling as it might be necessary out here in one of these type units.
Could you point out for us some specific areas? Now, you are in the building business, and you happen to be a member of the Housing Authority Board. What specific areas do you see out here that cause the problems that the maintenance department will have in Young Fort?
Well, starting with the roof, you've got a lot of areas where it's certainly a long period of gradual leaking, where some of the eaves and so forth, the shingles aren't applied properly. You've got your little flat built-up areas over the stoops in a lot of apartments where it's just nothing. It's certainly not a maintenance item. It's where some of them probably have leaked from since the time they were put up there. It's kind of hard to say for sure, but it certainly looks that way. Things like the subflooring, I understand that the maintenance department had a tremendous amount of expense in trying to replace. It's made of a flake board type material, and it was getting moisture to it through some unknown way, and this stuff just kind of disintegrates after being wet. Therefore, a tenant living in an upstairs apartment around a sink or something that gets a little moisture, a little dampness, a little leak under a sink, the whole floor will, in essence, just deteriorate and rot out.
Nebraska looks like a fine football team to me, and big, strong, fast, and have lots of them. But they lost several fumbles right in the clutch that kept them from scoring. And it's one of those things that happens to a lot of people that you said, boy, we could play that again, we could play it again. It happened to us. It happened to us at Oxford Jackson last year, but you don't get to play them but once.
What are some of the strengths and strong points of the Nebraska team?
Well, I already talked to Dee Powell. He knew, been studying them all summer and knows all about them, but they look strong to me in every department.
The Boston Red Sox jumped out to a quick 2-0 lead in Game 1 of their crucial 3-game series with the New York Yankees as Captain Carl Yastrzemski got things started with his triple off the center field wall in the second inning. Center fielder Mickey Rivers overthrew the cutoff man, allowing Yaz to make it to third without a throw. After a walk to Carlton Fisk, Yanks starter Ron Guidry wild-pitched Yastrzemski home just minutes later. Rookie third baseman Butch Hobson drove in the only other run the Sox would get with his clean single to left. For Hobson, it was his 100th RBI of the year, keeping him in the race for Rookie of the Year honors. The Yanks started to peck away at the lead in the fourth. Lou Pinella's 2-out single off Sox starter Mike Paxton sent Chris Chambliss across the plate with the first of 4 Yankee runs. It was all over for Paxton and the Sox in the fifth as Mickey Rivers, a solid candidate for this year's American League MVP award, followed a single by Bucky Dent with his 11th homer of the year. Before the inning ended, Chris Chambliss added the insurance run with a double off Sox reliever Jim Willoughby, sending Reggie Jackson all the way home with the last run to be scored in this contest. From there, center stage belonged to Guidry, the 27-year-old rookie who has quickly become the darling of Yanks fans. He wasn't about to be beat as he went to work and just mowed the Sox down. He gave up just 5 hits, finished with 9 strikeouts, including the final 2 batters of the game, as the Yanks took the all-important first of 3 set to increase their lead in the American League East to 2.5 games over the Red Sox and 3 over the idle Baltimore Orioles. Final again, Yanks 4, Sox 2. Jimmy Myers reporting.
And we're going to Spotlight in 12 Country. It's right on the Florida line. And it's probably best known for the prison farm there, but we're going to find out more about Atmore today from its mayor, Patricia McKenzie. Pat, what else does Atmore have besides that prison that everybody already is, the prison farm that everyone's already familiar with?
We have a great many things. We have a fantastic recreation program, 3 parks, 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools, 7 tennis courts. We have a very active community art council that produces plays, arranges to have an artist in residence to teach painting and sculpture and pottery to both young people during the summer recreation program and to adults at night and all year. And we have a very good school system. And
I understand that your school system is actually very much supported by the city through the taxes, is it?
it is. We subsidize the school system. It's a county system, but we subsidize it with 1/3 of our gross receipts tax. And this lowers our pupil-teacher ratio and makes for a much better school system.
What about the forests around there? Is there a great usage of the forests in your area?
Yes, many of our paper companies are located around Atmore. And so we have we have a big sawmill in Atmore. We also have several other industries, a large carpet factory, lingerie manufacturing company, and several other smaller industries, but we're seeking more industry. We have been fortunate enough to be able to build an intrastate gas pipeline which connects us with the Mallard Exxon field, which is one of the largest intrastate gas producers in Alabama. And we feel that this will be a tremendous boost to our ability to secure industry.
Being that close to Florida, is the soil there sandy?
No, we have excellent soil. Farming is one of our, agriculture and farming is one of our major industries, but as we all know, the farmers have a hard time making it just on the farm, and many of them particularly small farmers, need a job in industry to supplement their incomes.
You've just about completed your first term as mayor. Have you found that being a woman is an asset or a detriment?
I think it's probably an asset. It's, people are surprised to see a woman mayor and probably pay more attention. And since I am, I think, the mayor, the woman mayor of the largest Alabama town, I guess. I think that probably I've received more publicity than I deserve, but it's fun. I love people and enjoy meeting them and can almost always find a common ground of interest with anyone I meet.
I understand you're a full-time mayor. Does that mean that you put in time every day? And if so, how many hours approximately?
Well, it varies, anywhere from 8 to almost 23. No, I'm teasing, but I'm involved with the Alabama League of Municipalities and also with the South Alabama Regional Planning Commission and the CETA program in Mobile Consortium, and there are lots of meetings after hours.
Well, thank you very much, Pat McKenzie, for letting us meet you and for letting us learn a little bit more about Atmore. So now we know it has much more than a prison farm.
Thank you.
Well, you've seen more of 12 Country today and learned more about it, and we hope that you'll enjoy and maybe tell us a little bit about your town if you're part of 12 Country. We'll return with more news after this message.
Divided with a 68 white, 4 with a CP antenna, and the last number was 506 on the tag. They don't have it. You know what you want, right?
There's no doubt that urban universities across the country, including the urban university in Birmingham, Alabama, are experiencing a great deal of growth and development. I think all Alabamians are very proud of what we've been able to do in the state and the medical school there and the programs that they've developed. I think people in Tuscaloosa regard themselves as one of the ancient centers of learning. They've been in business since about 1831, and I think they fully expect to stay in that and recognize and applaud the growth in Birmingham. I'm sure Auburn, for example, has the same feeling about it.
Is there any policy that would possibly lead people to believe that there would be a transfer?
I don't know of anybody having made a conscious decision to do that. I think it's really more just a reflection of the patterns of growth in the state and the very dynamic program that exists in Birmingham.
Good evening, and welcome to Composite. On this week's program, we're going to take you into the world of the supernatural. We'll introduce you to the author of a book about 13 of Alabama's most famous ghosts. And we'll also find out about the Red Lady of Huntington College. Plus, we'll talk with a parapsychologist who claims to be able to communicate with the spirit world. Your host for this week's Composite is Dave Rickey. Dave?
Thank you, Bob. You know, the world is full of historic folklore, and the southern region of the United States is definitely no exception. In fact, many Southerners will claim the South has more legends and folklore than any other region of the country. And included in all of this folklore are the ever-popular stories about Southern ghosts. And when it comes to ghost stories, we felt there would be no one better qualified to talk to than the author of several books on the Southern ghosts, Catherine Tucker Wyndham. We talked with Mrs. Wyndham recently at her home in Selma. Mrs. Wyndham, how and when did you first start showing interest in ghosts?
Well, really, I guess I was too young to remember when I was first interested in ghosts, because I think all of us are interested in ghosts. We hear ghost tales when we're children, and maybe we don't take them too seriously. It's kind of fun to be frightened a little bit. I think I've always been interested in ghosts because they're so closely associated with folklore, which is one of my big interests. But I became seriously interested, I suppose, when something came to live in our house here in Selma, something that we call Jeffrey. And maybe it's a ghost, maybe it's something, I really don't know. But there's something here in this house that clumps up and down the hall and opens and closes doors and rocks in a rocking chair. Used to frighten our poor old cat named Hornblower. Unfortunately, Hornblower has died since then. But did all sorts of strange things here that made us wonder. And after Jeffrey came to live in this house, I went back to Huntington College and talked to my college English teacher, Margaret Fye, who is one of Alabama's finest folklore experts. Told her about Jeffrey, and we talked about other famous Alabama ghosts, and thought, you know, really we should preserve these ghost tales by putting them in a book, so we set out to write a book which we called 13 Alabama Ghosts in Jeffrey. And we went all over the state collecting what we thought were the finest of Alabama's ghost stories, 13 of the best to go in this book. And once I got started, I just couldn't stop. It's a fascinating hobby. It's really great.
How long has Jeffrey been living here?
Oh, about 10 years.
No major problems with him, though? He just scares people?
Oh, no. He's a lot of fun. A lot of fun. We have a good time with him. We blame everything that goes wrong on Jeffrey, and we wouldn't be without him. He's fine. I don't think anybody's ever been frightened of Jeffrey. It's just been something to create a lot of conversation, a lot of interest, and just really fun.
Now, when you go on speaking engagements and you talk to people about the ghost stories that you've heard of, do they come back with more of their own usually?
Yes, that's the greatest source of collecting ghost tales. If you approach one person or even a group of people and say, do you know a ghost story? Their immediate reaction is, no, we don't know a ghost story. But if you will tell them a ghost story, then almost invariably they will tell you something. They'll open up and tell you some strange thing that has happened to them or to someone who's very close to them. So that's how I get a whole lot of my ghost stories. And it's fun because I like to hear these tales they have to tell. And they'll tell them if they realize that you're going to listen with not only interest but with respect to what they have to say, and not going to make fun of them or belittle them. And these tales that people tell me, I'm sure that they believe them because, you know, you've been around in the news business long enough to know when people are putting you on. And people ask me real often, you know, are all these stories true that you write about? Now that's real hard to answer, except to say that I am confident that the people who told me these stories believed that they were true. And I have checked every story out as far as it's possible to do so. I visited the sites where they all happened, talked to the people involved, visited cemeteries where the people are buried, you know, to check on the dates on the graves and so forth, and talked to local historians about the events that were involved in the ghost tale, because I like ghost stories that have some historical connection, not just clanking chains and flashing lights, you know, but some that really have some meaning and some meat in them, a little more than just little scary happenings.
Now, you've talked about other people believing and not believing in ghosts, so I'm going to ask you straightforward, do you believe in ghosts?
Well, you asked me a straightforward question, so I'm going to give you an evasive answer. I'm going to say that I really don't think it makes any difference whether I believe in ghosts or not. I think that the important thing is that you don't have to believe in ghosts to enjoy ghost stories. And also, you don't have to believe in ghosts to recognize the importance of saving these ghost stories. So it really doesn't matter a whit to me whether people believe in ghosts or not, if they will just help save these stories. Because that's what I'm primarily concerned with, is preserving our rich heritage of ghost tales. We have had so many splendid ghost stories that we have lost because the great tellers of stories have died. And nobody recognized the worth of these stories enough to put them on paper or even to remember them completely. And so these good stories died with these older people. And we mustn't let this keep on happening. We've got to save these ghost tales because they are as much a part of our history as De Soto's visit or the Civil War or any of the other great events in Alabama or in the South.
What are some of your most favorite and, say, most fascinating ghost stories?
My one all-time favorite is the ghost of the Eliza Battle, because it's a ghost of a steamship. It's rather unlikely ghost. You know, we think ghost of people, you know, that look like white sheeted figures, and don't often think of inanimate objects becoming ghosts. But this is that splendid steamship which was described as the finest boat that ever plied the Tombigbee River. And she was taking a group of wealthy planters and their families and friends down to Mardi Gras at Mobile in the 1850s. Ran into a late winter ice storm, caught fire, and sank there at the river near Nahiola, the present landing of Nahiola. And since that time, people living along the river, and fishermen and hunters who are there, especially at night, frequently tell of seeing this brilliant glow that starts way up the river in the fog and the mist and comes nearer and nearer, and as that glow comes nearer, they hear strange music, happy dancing music, but not the kind of music that we are accustomed to hearing now. And they are sure that they see and hear the ghost of the Eliza Battle trying to finish a voyage down to Mobile. And I like that tale.
Mrs. Wyndham, thank you so much. It was a pleasure and an honor to sit here and talk with you this afternoon.
Well, thank you for coming over. I enjoyed your visit and enjoyed telling ghost tales to you. I hope you'll come back and bring me some new ghost tales.
I'll certainly try if I can. In a moment, we'll return to Montgomery and visit one of its most favorite ghosts, the Red Lady at Huntington College. All that when Composite continues. Huntington College is one of the oldest and most historic colleges in the South. Once a private all-girls college, Huntington has now developed into a highly respected coeducational institution with about 600 students. But some persons say Huntington has a resident in one of the dormitories who is not a current student, but they say she is instead a live-in ghost, and she's called the Red Lady.
There's times when I can feel her presence in the room, a cold draft on a warm night, or there's a lot of nights when she's opened our window.
Have you ever seen her or heard her?
Well, never really heard her except some strange noises at night, not wailings or anything like that, but noises that couldn't be accounted for, but I've never seen her walk.
What or who do you think the Red Lady is?
I believe the Red Lady is whom she's written about us in 13 Alabama Ghosts that Catherine Wyndham writes. She was a student who once came to Huntington who was very unhappy, and she committed suicide.
And you believe this is her ghost that so many people talk about?
I didn't believe it till I came to school here, but I firmly believe it now.
Why? I mean,
Well, The reason I'm living in the room now is because some other students were scared out of the room because of her presence. And there's just been too many unusual happenings within the dorm and on the floor that can't be explained. And her ghost is a pretty good explanation to fall back on.
Were you scared?
No, it's just something you learn to live with. I guess before you move on the floor, you know that she's going to be there. And it just comes along with the college.
Freshman year, I saw her. I heard the girls screaming, and, you looked out and girls were, just seeing what was going on out in the hall, and you saw her just flash down the hall.
What'd she look like?
She had a red dress on, her hair was real frizzy, and it was froed out, and she had, like, white powder in it. And that's all I saw. It was, like either gray or white, she was just all.
Did it scare you when you first saw her?
No, it was just something everybody talked about and something you expected, It's the minute you walk on Huntington College campus, first thing, red lady, it's one of the traditions.
You don't feel at all threatened by her?
No, not whatsoever. I've heard the first time the girl told me the story of her, she told it in a sympathetic way, and it was not a spirit to be afraid of. It was a spirit to sympathize with, and any girl could relate to her, a girl having problems with a roommate and another roommate and another roommate, and finally she just couldn't cope, and that's the way I look at it. And it's not as a ghost that would harm you or scare you or whatever.
You feel sorry for her?
No, I feel very sorry for her. I've related to her before, sitting in the room and, just lonely nights looking outside. You just, I don't know why, I think about her. And she must have been a very lonely girl.
Are you convinced that what you see and hear is a ghost?
No, I think it's a spirit that was told to me, and I can't explain it. It's just something that you can feel. It's a sympathy toward sort of thing,
You don't think that what you've seen and heard are pranks by, say, upperclassmen?
I do feel it's pranks by upperclassmen because being an upperclassman, I pull these pranks. But that doesn't go along, the pranks is something that you expect, orientation for a new freshman, and it's to get them all out, and it's to get everybody together. All the girls are in the hall, the phone rings, and they announce her, and everybody waits for her, and it's an exciting thing, and it's something. When you first come to college, you're scared anyways, you don't know what to expect, It's just another little gimmick to get everybody to get to know each other, and and it's something that, if you can tell the story to a freshman in a sympathetic way, and think of it as a young girl like all the rest of us in the dorm, then you can relate to her. But there are girls that, might have been told a different story, and, there must be hundreds of stories going around.
But nevertheless, you still believe that the spirit of the Red Lady still walks?
I sure do. Sure do.
Have, quote, seen the Red Lady walk?
I'm inclined to think they have vivid imagination, frantically. You heard that, I'm sure. There's hardly a college.
You don't believe that there is such thing as a Red Lady that is a ghost of a former student?
I'm afraid I'm a skeptic.
But others believe that very much, don't they?
Yes, they do. And I suppose it's not particularly good business for me to say this, since I wrote a story about her, 13 ghosts. But like George, I cannot tell a lie.
Doesn't that cause a problem when so many people do believe, and so many people believe they have seen her?
Yes.
How would you explain?
I never contradicted. If they've seen her, I just haven't seen her.
If you believe the Red Lady is indeed a legend, how could you explain the many students who say they have, quote, seen the Red Lady walk?
I'm inclined to think they have vivid imaginations. And sometimes we think we see what we want to see. But
excuse me, go ahead.
I think that she's a legend worth fostering. She will walk again. I'm confident of that.
You can put that on the shoulder, yeah. Same camera, just put it on the shoulder. I do thank you.
Sure.
It'll be on Saturday night at 6:30.
All right.
In a moment, we'll talk with another expert on ghosts and tales of the supernatural, parapsychologist Dr. Roberta Szynski. That coming up when Composite returns. Continuing this evening's program concerning ghosts and tales of the supernatural, we're talking with parapsychologist and self-professed clairvoyant Dr. Roberta Szynski. One of Dr. Szynski's attributes is in investigating suspected ghosts. Dr. Szynski, when you decide to investigate a suspected ghost, what would be your first step?
Well, the first thing I do is I go to the area. If it's in a person's home, I go to their home, and I check the house to make sure that it's not a material object or occurrence that is causing the disturbance. Sometimes there are strange sounds in a house that come from something that's in the attic, like a fan or something that they don't realize is there. So we make a thorough investigation to make sure that it's not a material thing. Then when we've completed that, then we start investigating why the situation is as it is, and part of this is in trying to see or contact the entity that is there and find out why they're there. What is it that is holding them to that area? Is it a person? Is it the house itself? Is it an object in the house? Sometimes people buy antiques, and along with the antiques they acquire the person who is very attached to it. After we find out why they're there, then we try to talk them back to the other side and talk them into releasing their hold on whatever it is they have.
You say talk to, do you mean verbally or mentally?
There are both ways you can do it. If you have a good trance medium, or you have subjects that make good trance mediums and they can get into an alpha theta level of consciousness, then that allows the entity to use their voice box so you can have open communication on a one-to-one basis. If not, then you need a good clairaudient psychic that can pick it up in a mental level and carry on the counseling in that way.
That's what most people think of as a seance, right?
It would be very similar to a seance, yes.
What are some of the most interesting situations that you yourself have looked into so far as like ghosts and...
Well, there is a couple that lives here in town just recently. This has been about 3 months ago. And they bought an older home and had it refurbished. And they left the original chandeliers in the home, which are very large, and they have like finger-width crystals on about 5 tiers. And they noticed that the crystals moved independently of each other, and they would move in strange directions, not just like maybe the house was shaking, so the crystals are moving. There were a set of 4 crystals that moved. 2 of them would move back and forth this way, and the other 2 would move this way. So they asked me if I would come and take a look at it because they were very uncomfortable in the room. They didn't like being in that room. So I went over and we looked, and I went upstairs and went through the upstairs, and I went up through the attic to see if there was anything causing the house to be vibrating, although we couldn't feel anything. We checked for drafts. We checked. They have no air conditioning in the house, so we knew that it wasn't central heating. And then I sat down and established contact and found that there was indeed a lady there. So I called a group of my student teachers together with the people that own the house, and we sat down and found that it was someone who had lived in that house a long time ago, someone who did not want to let go because they were frightened of dying, and the home had meant security to them. So by the time we finished that evening, and by the time I had counseled with the entity, she's never been back.
What exactly do you say to someone like that, or something like that?
I try to explain to them, one, that they are indeed what we would call dead, that they are no longer living among the physical bodies, and that it's really only a change in consciousness, and that there is nothing to fear because there are other individuals on that side of life that are geared to helping people make a transition, just like I'm geared to helping people who have problems here. And that if she would just allow her fear to fade long enough, she would see these people, they would be able to come to her. And this is the way you try to encourage them. You try to get them to relax and just alleviate their fears, just like we do with people on this side of life that are having psychological problems.
You very obviously believe in supernatural entities and that sort of thing, but there are so many people that just kind of laugh it all off. How can you explain that?
Well, I think, one, because so much superstition surrounds ghosts and entities and parapsychology. But if you go back, now I have a degree in comparative studies in religions, and if you go back through time immemorial, you know, as far back as you can go, you find that parapsychology has played a very great part in all spiritual beliefs, regardless of what religion you want to name. But down through the years, they've lost their meaning. People nowadays think they don't need to rely on their psychic abilities as much as they did during the biblical days. You go through the Bible and there's visions and dreams and appearances. Now, people think that that's foolish. They rely on technology. So a lot of superstition has surrounded this. However, at this time, people are coming away from that again and beginning to understand parapsychology because we have technological advancements that help us to prove, for example, the aura. I can remember when I was a young girl and I could see the aura around people, and everybody used to laugh at me. But now we have Kirlian photography that actually photographs the aura. Talking about people not dying. You know, some people say when you die, you're dead, and that's all there is to it. Dr. Moody, M.D., who wrote the book Life After Life, has proven through people who have been declared clinically dead and then resuscitated because of technology, come back, and they all have the same story about what they went through, their experiences. And this is worldwide, not just from one particular ethnic group or religious group. It's a vast cross-section. So technology is helping us to prove that parapsychology is very valid, that the psychic senses do exist, that clairvoyants haven't been spoofing us for all these centuries. So it's a very valuable study right now, and eventually it will become a science just like the medical profession.
And that's all the time we have for this week's Composite. With tonight's presentations, we haven't tried to convince you that ghosts do actually exist, but rather we have simply presented several persons' viewpoints on the subject. We hope you were able to keep an open mind on the matter, since that's what it's all about. At any rate, thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope you've enjoyed it. I'm Dave Rickey for Composite.
Thank you, Dave. Your host next week on Composite is News Director Clark Edwards. We hope that you will join him. Composite was pre-recorded for broadcast during this time period and is a presentation of the News and Public Affairs Department of WSFA TV.
Who's that?
They had a good ball game. Really blocked. Yes, really blocked.
You got a pretty young team overall?
No, not really. Our line is young. We've got all of our wideouts back, and we got tight end Christopher Williams, which is a real good receiver, and David Atkinson, Brian Slaughter, Keith Thompson, Jerry Flippo. A lot of these kids catch the ball well. We're going to have to throw the ball, to be able to go.
Okay, what about your running game now?
Well, our running game is going to be sufficient. Crenshaw the other night, our quarterback, which is a real fine athlete, he broke two. He scored 2 touchdowns running and then threw for 1. And he's added a new dimension to our running game. And
I think our defense is probably our strong point. We have some good inside linebackers, 2 Jones boys, and Morgan Davis, defensive tackle, and Theodore Jackson, I guess, is probably our strength on defense.
Come on, come on.
Catch, Bob. All right.
There were some tapes and a device. Purely domestic. all that was involved. No one has been harmed, no one has been hurt, none of them in existence. This happened in my bedroom between me and my wife. What happens between me and my wife, as long as it doesn't affect the state of Alabama, for my service as governor, remains the business of my wife and myself. There have been some alluding to the fact that politics were involved. There were no politics involved at all. Anyone who thinks that, they just have to think it. It's difficult to solve domestic matters under all the trying circumstances, especially if you are in politics. And I think we can better resolve what differences we might have, if any, by the press, them accepting what I'm saying, that this was purely domestic matter and nothing else. No one has been harmed, no one has been offended, and that's that.
Been working too, haven't you?
And back them up to each other. The center where it would go around the chimney. This particular pool.
I found that people to be very friendly, and as far as the tour is concerned, I have particular interest in some older buildings, so visiting the first White House of the Confederacy was interesting, and George Wallace's mansion where he is and the Capitol were all interesting to me.
This Jasmine Hill, I would say mainly, it is a lovely place.
Well, I think being from the North, you have a lot of preconceived, impressions of the South, and I've really found them to be untrue. The people are so friendly.
It's a beautiful country, but it seems a lot slower pace. It seems a little more enjoyable.
I think it's fantastic, really.
Alabama has it all.
What's the first thing you're going to tell people when you get back to the Dearborn area?
Go to Alabama. No doubt about it.
With me today is Al DuPont, and he's Director of Community Planning and Development for the city of Tuscaloosa, and that's part of 12 country. Tell us a little bit about Tuscaloosa. How did it get its name, Al?
Well, I think that from Tuscaloosa, I'm Director of Community Planning and Development in Tuscaloosa, and I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. And I've been in Tuscaloosa several years, and the name itself was derived from an old Indian chief, and the legend is that he was about 7 feet tall, and his name was Tuscaloosa, sort of from the Indian name of Chief Tuscaloosa, and it was described as the city of Tuscaloosa. We were incorporated into a city in 1819, and we have celebrated several centennials since we've been there, or bicentennials, whatever it is, and we do have an old city. It's an old southern style city, kind of colonial, and but we are very progressive in the city of Tuscaloosa. As you know, the University of Alabama is located there, and higher education, and we have some very fine schools. And the city itself is considered as one of the fastest growing cities in the state of Alabama. By making this statement is that through our population and also our water supply and building permits and things like this. Now, Tuscaloosa, as I mentioned before, it's a real nice place to live, not to be from, but to live. We have very wide streets, which was derived again from the survey, and I myself being an engineer, was that they derived it from a chain and a half, which a chain was 66 feet, so they said we'll make all streets a chain and a half, making it 99 feet wide. So that was really an asset to us, that we do have wide streets considered to some of these other cities with real narrow streets. Now, we do have the University of Alabama. That's a big asset to it, like I mentioned. It provides culture, education, and several other things for us, and it's also helpful to the city of Tuscaloosa. Now, we have in Tuscaloosa a very good professional hospital that we have there. Medical services are excellent. In median family income, and being that we are associated with a school, a higher education, we do have a high median family income in the city of Tuscaloosa, which is also a big help to us. And then at least, you know, in your industry-wise, we have very favorable industries in Tuscaloosa.
Are you encouraging people to move there, or do you feel like you've had enough growth and want to keep that old town feeling?
No, we're encouraging people to move at all times. We are, like I said, through several of our programs in the last few years in the general revenue sharing and now our community development money in our block grants, we are improving a lot of areas. We're doing a lot of drainage work. We're doing a lot of housing and also street and sewer treatment and water treatment and all this. So by doing all this, we're providing a lot of services to extra people in certain neighborhoods. We have an excellent water facility in our new lake that has encouraged a lot of people to live and be on Lake Tuscaloosa, and that's a wonderful thing. You're within maybe 8 minutes from downtown, or even less than that, and you can live out there in the city limits, which parts of it have been incorporated, and live near the lake and be classified as being in town.
So you have sort of the best of both worlds, both city and country.
We do, and like I said, we feel very secure in Tuscaloosa, and I've been a family man that I've raised a son and a daughter in Tuscaloosa, and crime-wise and things like this, I think it's very low and all, and we feel like a family atmosphere that if your kids want to ride their bike to the Little League Park, they can.
It sure sounds like a nice place to live, as you say. Thank you very much, Al. Well, you've heard about Tuscaloosa today. Tomorrow, you'll hear about another town in 12 country. We'll return with more news after this message.
At this time, I'm going to ask Sonny Coughlin, who is Mr. Watley's administrative assistant to
Mr. Watley asked that I
the doggone companies, and I'm going to give those who would at this point in time an opportunity to be heard, take up this issue and make a decision.
supersedes, they took the benefit of that, they cannot now attack that same order. The testimony in the case is that they have any unlawful within 5 minutes to keep the state of that unpaid money.
These refunds to a few large business.
These are people who live in formerly rural areas which have now grown up, and there are a large number of telephones in these areas, so that mileage charges are no longer justifiable. And this will save these families some $1.7 million a year by eliminating or reducing the mileage charges.
Well, Bill, we are encouraged that the Public Service Commission has recognized that an emergency does exist, and that additional funds are necessary for us to operate until our overall rate case is decided. Of course, this doesn't solve our problems by any means. The fact remains that we still do not have adequate funds to cover all the cost of providing telephone service, including capital costs. And we, of course, are glad that the hearings on the overall case have been scheduled soon, and that we can proceed and get a decision on that request.
Does the part of the order requiring that you let go of the mileage rates in certain areas and increase the base also add a burden to the company?
Well, it does mean a loss in revenue of, I think the figure was about $1.7 million. And, of course, this is a decision that was made by the commission, and we have no choice but to abide by it.
All parties involved seem to be relatively satisfied with today's decision. However, that decision is short-lived. On October 4th, the more far-reaching chapter of this issue will begin when the utility, the PSC, and interveners get together to decide on a permanent rate increase for South Central Bell. From the State Office Building in Montgomery, Bill Weaver, WSFA TV News.
I think that issue, that social desirability or undesirability, depending on the social approach, is not the real issue. What you're faced with is a legal problem. It's charged to a person that has been determined to be unlawful. That person has paid out
Identifying the refund amount and getting it to a number of these customers would be larger than the amount of refund itself.
Well, you have reference, I believe, Mr. Nixon, to instances, for example, when a subscriber has certain food charges or they moved off and to locate that subscriber would cost more than the amount to be refunded.
That's one.
I'd say one amount, one way of it.
In this particular matter, refund, you
But you're providing today the real accountability to the taxpayers of this county. You went to those people and said, give us more tax money, we'll get your schools accredited. The school people have delivered today. The real benefit, I guess, of accreditation comes from the self-study that the faculty and the community does. You have reaped those benefits already. I was real interested this morning in a local paper on a survey that had been run, and the people of this county had said that even if ad valorem taxes are increased, they'd still favor this sales tax for schools. This is a great statement from the public.